Hello and welcome back to Monbiosis on COP26.tv. And today we're going to discuss, well, an issue which should be absolutely top of the agenda at the official summit, which is the position, the situation of Africa, which is so hard hit now by climate breakdown and yet so poorly represented at international talks. What we've seen this year is what some people have described as the most exclusive and privileged COP summit there has ever been, thanks to the enormous barriers that have been raised to participants from Africa and elsewhere. But so many of the rich world's projects for extracting fossil fuels are now taking place in Africa, while horrific heat events, cyclones, droughts, and the rest are hitting many African nations. So without the full representation of African delegates, it seems to me that this summit is, well, almost farcical. Anyway, I'm delighted to say that we have three extremely prominent and impressive people to discuss this issue. We have Nnimmo Basey, IIna-Marie Shikongo, and Daniel Ribeiro, all originating from different nations in Africa. And I'm going to ask you to tell me first about your work, and then also in the same answer, if you don't mind, what you would like to see happening at this summit. Could we start with you, Nnimmo?
Thank you so much, George. It's really nice to be on this program with you. I've been following your work and very helpful indeed. Now, I lead Health of Mother Earth Foundation in Nigeria. We work in Nigeria is our base, but our focus is Africa. As the name implies, we are concerned about the health of the planet, of Mother Earth, not just for humans, but for all beings who live on the planet. We focus on fossil politics, on hunger politics, asking the question, why are people hungry? And then building our work based on local knowledge and what really people on the grounds are expecting and what they're doing, what their struggles are.
Thank you very much, Nnimmo. Now, IIna-Marie Shikongo, you're an artist as well as an activist. Tell me something about your
work. Hello, thank you for having me, and very nice to meet you. Sorry, the voice is so rusty from all the screaming the past 2 days, last week. So I'm Ina, I'm now currently in Glasgow for the summit. And yes, I am a mother, artist, poet, and one of the co-founders of Fridays for Future Namibia, Vinto. And we are currently here to defend our homeland that is under threat by a company called Recon Africa that is hoping to extract 120 billion barrels of oil. So we are here to shed more light on it. And it is an amazing opportunity to be able to talk about it. And yeah, thank you for having us once again.
It's fantastic to have you on the program. Thank you, IIna-Marie. And Daniel, tell me something about your work and what you want to see changing.
Hi, thanks for having us. My name is Daniel Ribeiro. I'm from Justiça Ambiental, Friends of the Earth, Mozambique. And as you know, Mozambique is one of the most vulnerable countries affected by climate change, but we have contributed very little. And unfortunately, Mozambique is starting its fossil fuel projects. We've just, in the last 10 years, started with coal, and we're going to start with gas. So we're worried about, we should be ending it. And unfortunately, the only options for development that have been coming to Mozambique are fossil fuels. We basically, as things get difficult to get these projects happening up north, they come to Africa. And so we really need to stop this. And this is causing a huge amount of land grabs, conflict, militarization, as people have heard on the news. And this is the reality. It's been the reality of fossil fuels. So it's not just the climate impacts, the social impacts and environmental impacts. And I'm not going to lie, I don't have much hope for the COP because it's been almost impossible to get our voices on there, and they failed in the past. But we do hope that we start preventing the false solutions, the net zeros, the reds, the carbon markets. Because at this moment, civil society globally has managed a lot of pressure on fossil fuels, and we're getting successes. And this is the escape route. If we allow these options of net zeros and these false solutions, that's gonna be the escape hatch that the fossil fuel is going to use, and we need to block that. So especially, I hope we can block Article 6. I hope we can block these kind of initiatives and really expose these lies, these false solutions, start getting real solutions.
Thank you very much. Now Nnimmo, Daniel alluded to what is often being described as the resource curse, that countries have suffered greatly because of the natural riches they have that other people want to exploit. So could you expand on that a bit and talk also about how we're really almost facing a global resource curse because we have these fossil fuels? We are now consigning ourselves almost potentially to oblivion. You're on mute still, Nnimmo.
Muted, yes. It's extremely amazing that humans, with all the intelligence and all the knowledge available, would insist on a mode of building civilization that certainly has to come to an end. The fossil fuel-led civilization has taken the planet and all the beings on it to the brink. Now, I come from the Niger Delta, and I very much share the concerns of Daniel in Mozambique, as well as IIna-Marie about what is being planned for Okavango. We don't want it to happen. The Niger Delta is one of the 10 top most polluted places on Earth. And this is because the fossil fuel industry, led by the most prominent transnational corporations, holds sway over the politics, over the economic arrangement. They work with international financial institutions, and they exploit without any sense of responsibility. So when we hear about the ills that are occurring in Nigeria politically, ecologically, and otherwise, we can trace all to the fossil fuel industry. And I don't often agree with the resource cost concept, because I believe that every resource is basically a gift from nature, and nature knew where to put the fossil fuels deep into the ground. It wasn't for us to start excavating and digging like rats for that resource. And if we use nature's resources respectfully, everything will work well for us. So really, it's a time for us to reboot, to rethink, and not believe that the more you pollute indicates how powerful you are. This is what is happening at the COP. The polluting nations are showing themselves to be the most powerful, to have the most refined finances, which have been taken from the poorer, vulnerable nations, of course, by grabbing their resources. And so everything we really need to critically look at what is going on and call out the fossil fuel industry, whom we are told have more delegates at COP26 than many nations added together. So the COP is been boxed to a corner by this industry, and they willingly go along with it. It's a very sad thing that we're seeing.
Now, Nnimmo, if I could just stay with you for a moment, because on the Niger Delta, where Shell, among other oil companies, has been exploiting oil, there's been a very brutal and bitter history there, hasn't there?
Yes, in fact, tomorrow, 10th November, marks 26 years since the execution of Ken Saro-Wiwa and 8 other Ogoni leaders. So it's been years, actually 63 years of unmitigated disaster since Shell started to exploit oil in Nigeria, followed by the other multinational corporations. Research done by the United Nations Environment Program has shown in the Ogoni area that soils and certain places have been contaminated to a depth of 5 meters. That was in 2011. But I can tell you right now, when some of those sites were excavated, the pollution had gone down as deep as 10 meters. So these are things that don't just disappear. We have water bodies, even the entire, the first aquifer under communities contaminated with layers of hydrocarbon. This is a clear definition of ecocide, but these corporations, because they have power, because they have the politicians in their pockets, they can just run roughshod over everybody. They're flaring gas, burning mighty gas furnaces, releasing methane, nitrogen oxide, sulfur oxide, carbon dioxide into the atmosphere, causing health impacts on communities. The life expectancy in the Niger Delta is now 41 years. You can't believe it, 41 years. Every weekend is a festival of funerals. And if they want to stretch this to Namibia, to anywhere else, I think this is a crime against humanity and against the planet, and they should be stopped.
Now, Nnimmo, you are worried that a similar process is coming to the Okavango Delta.
Yes, yes, of course. I mean, Nigeria is a perfect case study because we can see what happened to the Niger Delta, and not only in terms of pollution, but also human rights. I mean, what happened to Ken Saro-Wiwa. But even now, when they're talking about economic development, we can see that in Nigeria, for example, the girls have, children are being kidnapped. People are not going to school because of the criminals kidnapping these children. And these are just the after effects of this industry. So there is no development at all. So what I'm in particularly really worried about is because Namibia is a desert. We have the Namib Desert to the west and then the Kalahari. So the Kavango Basin is literally this oasis. I know that this company from Canada, Recon, is claiming that the Kavango Delta is far, but they are drilling next to the Matako River, and the Matako feeds the Kavango River that feeds the Kavango Delta. So they're basically depriving the water that is supposed to end up in the Delta. They are taking it even before it reaches it. So obviously it is going to dry out. And the other thing that is very particular about the Kavango is that it is a logged in Delta. So there is no outlet. So how is it going to recover? It will just become the toxins will just continue accumulating and accumulating. And I mean, we all know that we have one carbon budget. So how is it really going to affect the whole region? Also because over 1 million people depend on this water source for survival. We're talking about Angola, Namibia, Zimbabwe. So, Botswana. So it will impact us. And also when looking at wildlife and looking at the endangered species that are living there, I mean, even the African elephant has been now put on the list of endangered species. So, and this animal that is also being auctioned off by our government is so much needed for the survival of other species. Everything is interconnected. We cannot separate the two. So I think what really hurts me, especially about the COP and also about the world's leaders, is the fact that it's like I keep on saying, they are here to repeat the history of colonialism once again. We know what you want. You need oil, but we know that we are not even going to benefit from it. And also when you look at Namibia, especially now where we have hardcore evidence proving that even the current president, the way that was put into power, it was by buying people. People are now testifying because of this fish rot scandal that we call fish rot scandal, which is basically, sorry, it is basically it is basically a documentary that was exposed by Al Jazeera, where we see politicians receiving money from a company from Iceland, so for the campaign to get the current president in. So for me, as someone who was born in exile, who was born in the war already, who lost a father who was killed in the battle, I'm like, no, this is against the principles that we grew up with in exile. This is not what my father died for me to be here again, to continue on the work that he's been doing. He died so we can have our independence. And now we are here fighting corporations, sorry, fighting corporations, fighting this fossil fuel industry, and fighting politicians that have completely gone against the core principles that put them in power. So it is wrong. It is a crime against humanity. And even COP26, especially the global leaders, they need to give us a chance to develop in our ways. They need to step back. We don't need that oil. And even if there is oil, because apparently there is no oil, which is why the company itself, Recon Africa, is now currently being taken to court in the US by investors, because apparently this whole thing is a scam. But they're still drilling. The mud drill pits are not lined. So the toxins are still being put into the earth and staying there. They are not going anywhere. So for our San people that are foragers, hunter-gatherers, foragers, the food source is being taken away so these people can have their 120 billion barrels of oil, contributing or taking away a sixth of the carbon budget already. And then you have, what is his name? Alok Sharma and Boris Johnson saying that 1.5 is unrealistic. What is unrealistic is the fact that they are still willing to sacrifice indigenous nations globally so they can continue with these practices. So COP26, they really need to look at how they can preserve all life and not continue preserving their pockets.
Thank you, Nnimmo. Now, Daniel, as well as the financiers and the fossil fuel companies having their beady eyes on Africa's wealth, countries like your own have been absolutely hammered by the effects of climate breakdown, haven't they? Caused primarily by the great carbon emissions of the richer nations and the richer people within them. Tell me the experience of Mozambique.
So Mozambique has a few different impacts. We go from having cyclic droughts, but then we're having a huge increase in cyclones. We not only are the cyclones more frequent, the intensity has been increasing. For example, Idai and Kenneth were the two strongest cyclones on record. And Idai especially had a behavior that we have never seen before. We also have the highest surface ocean increase of all tropical oceans. In the Mozambique Canal is 1.2 degrees increase. And then we're very low lying. 40% of our land is below 200 meters. So we're very vulnerable to climate change. And we have our population, over 70% is subsistence farmers or fisher folk. So there's a strong link with the land, with the environment, and they have a very low footprint. And we need, and of course, development is needed, but we being a really difficult situation has been amplified by climate change. And there's no way to buy ourselves out of this, because if you look just at the Idai and Kenneth, that one bad cyclone season, we're talking about, if you include the indirect cost of damages of $3 billion. So if you look at what the contributions have, which is around $1 billion, it doesn't cover a third of one country's bad cyclone season. So it's ridiculous. There is no way that we can solve the problem through adaptation or other forms unless we get the fundamentals done, which is decrease emissions. We need to start decreasing emissions, and then we can adapt to 1.5. But adaptation, all these other only can happen or is a viable option if we get the fundamentals right. And Mozambique is an example, because we also have a few things. At this moment, some countries are locked into the fossil industry, and the just transition is quite complicated. We're not locked in, but the global economy wants to lock us in so we're creating a problem to then have a difficult, to find a problem to solve it. And instead of jumping this option, we're wanting to put Mozambique back into a more complicated situation while suffering from something we had no role. And we do not see, at least the historic responsibility is not, we still don't see that. Just and fair share is still not. We see this space being hijacked by corporate interests, and there's no courage to do what's needed. The science has done its work. It's shown what's needed. It shows the reality. It's very clear. The last report from IPCC, very clear. Civil society has done its part. The people on the ground have raised the voice to the part. Our leaders and corporations are not wanting to do what's needed.
And what's the attitude, Daniel, of most Mozambicans towards the plans to extract their fossil fuels?
The thing is, one of the problems is there's been a lot of propaganda. The corporations control all the media. So this notion of fossil fuels as a development path is a lot of people do believe that this is a way of Africa, because one, there is no other option. No other investment is coming in. The developed countries are only giving fossil fuels as an option for Africa, and they're not releasing the obstacles of patents and access to other alternatives. So there's also there's a component of, okay, what else can we do, and where can we get support for that? Where is the pathways that we can follow other than these pathways? And also there's no one's taking serious, like the North's not taking serious the fact that these southern countries like mine are actually what's keeping the window open for us to be able to solve the climate problem. If you close this, then it's in trouble. So we are keeping this window open for solutions to work. and we need to be recognized for that. And it has to be a system where we can allow ourselves to develop while still not having to be forced down this path. But the population is also, there's a lot of needs. And anyone that comes with this beautiful narrative that wealth and riches, people are desperate and want to believe it. However, with the conflict and with the increase of the problems, the oppression of civil society, land grabbing communities, internally displaced, and also the failure of the coal, because the coal sector is failing. All the companies are not making profits, the benefits aren't coming, and 10 years have passed and people start to realize the lie. So you're starting to get people understanding the issue and questioning this part. So we're in this transition of challenging and questioning, but we also desperate for, there's a lot of needs, and we're still unclear where we can get the support to meet to these needs. But when you ask people about what they're going through, and when they describe the reality, it's clear that this is affecting people on the ground in an unjust way, and people are starting to understand reality. Because don't forget, we're starting to get the, understanding the reality of fossil fuels. A part of us always knew, but there's always a group that takes time, and sometimes lived experience, unfortunately, has a bigger weight. And that's what's happening now. A lot of people are living through the injustice and starting to raise their voices.
Thank you, Daniel. Nnimmo, we're coming towards the end of the program now, but as you suggested before, we're seeing this extraordinarily unequal COP process where the fossil fuel companies turned up en masse, over 500 delegates, which, as you say, is more than that of a whole load of countries combined, including some of the most climate vulnerable countries. What needs to change here? How best should the voices of African people and people around the world be represented at these climate talks?
Well, principally, I believe that the COP will be difficult to reform. So maybe the best thing is to shut down the COP and make the outside People's Summit the real COP. We saw the failure of Copenhagen and how successful the People's Summit was in Cochabamba in 2010. Within 2 days, clear-cut decisions were reached about how to fund climate mitigation, adaptation, and building of resilience through payment of a climate debt. The loss and damage conversation of the COP is not going very far, not going quickly, because the rich countries who are responsible, historically responsible, presently responsible, don't want to put cash on the table. But really, there's a historical climate debt that's being owed, and this should be recognized and discussed at the conference of the people, not necessarily conference of the parties. And then the issue of, as Daniel mentioned, as Ina-Maria also alluded to, we need to look at the real root cause of this global warming. It's all agreed that the issue is about digging up and burning fossil fuels. But what's happening to Africa? Over the next decade, the fossil fuel industry is planning to invest about $250 billion US. By 2050, they're expecting to invest about $1.4 trillion US. Now, this is totally contrary to the logic of cutting down fossil emissions. And they can afford to do this because they hope using the military on the continent to to commit impunity, all kinds of atrocities, genocide, ecocide, and they get away with digging and maintaining, forcing the world to keep to a lifestyle of consumption, destruction, and just lack of respect and for peoples and their dignity. So I think first at the COP, these corporations who are driving us in the wrong direction should be kept out of the COP. They should be totally kicked out of the COP. And then they should be held totally responsible. There should be an environmental tribunal or the rights of nature tribunal set up to try those who are harming the planet, who are harming peoples, and who are distorting and disturbing people from moving away from dependence on dirty energy. This is way to the future. And if the COP is a stumbling block, let's shut it down.
Thank you so much, Nnimmo, Ina-Maria, and Daniel. That was a really fantastic discussion. And let's hope that someone starts listening, because yours are the voices which should be front and center of this process. So I'm very grateful to you for coming on to Monbiosis on COP26.tv. And thank you everyone for listening. Please stay with the channel. There's a lot more coming.